little bit about LangServe. Eric will talk about LangChain templates for the majority. And then we want to take a lot of user questions. So if there's questions that you have, drop them ideally in the Q&A box. So if you look on the right, there's a little chat box that you guys are all in by default. And then below that, there's a Q&A box. Drop them in there. You can upvote other questions as well. So that way the most popular questions will kind of rise to the top. And yeah, we want to leave a lot of time for questions, so we'll leave probably like 20 or 30 minutes for that. So feel free to start dropping them in there right away. And the biggest question we usually get is whether this is being recorded, and it is being recorded. So it will be available at this link after the fact, and then we'll upload it to YouTube as well. Yeah, so I think that's the main logistics. So with that out of the way, yeah, my name's Harrison, CEO at LangChain. And I've done a bunch of these, so hopefully you guys recognize me. And then Eric, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, and I'm Eric. I'm an engineer here at LangChain. This is my first webinar, so nice to meet you. And I'm doing a lot of work on templates in the Clay.
Awesome. So I'm going to talk a little bit about LangServe to start. And so the main thing that I'm going to walk through is just the README on the LangServe page and walk through it and explain it. So I put the link for that in the chat as well if you guys want to follow along there. And so what LangServe is basically the easiest and best way to deploy kind of like LangChain applications. And we didn't build this for a while because I think like we didn't know how much value we could add on top of existing kind of like serving methods that were out there. But I think with some changes and advancements in the LangChain core library, as well as just ideas that we had about what like a good LangChain deployment would actually look like, we're excited enough about this to have put some work into it. And so yeah, as a high level overview, this helps people deploy LangChain runnables and chains as a REST API. So chains are kind of like the traditional chain class. And then runnables, if you guys have noticed, we've been doing a lot of like the pipe syntax with the LangChain expression language over the past few months, and we just call those runnables. And I think the reason that this is so powerful as well is it's really easy to create custom versions of those. And one thing we've noticed is people don't just want to use like the conversational retrieval chain out of the box. They maybe want to like modify certain parts of it, whether it be the prompts or the logic underneath it. And so having this runnables is a really easy way to dynamically create things and edit things is really powerful. We use Fast API and Pydantic kind of like under the hood, so pretty traditional technologies there. And then some other there's a bunch of features, and so some of these are all of the LangChain objects that you write, even the custom ones that are in this LangChain expression language, we try to infer as best as possible the inputs and outputs. And so this lets us automatically generate kind of like API schemas that you can call. We also, so we auto-generate these API docs. We expose a bunch of different endpoints. So invoke, batch, stream, and then stream log. So invoke is just like one thing in, one thing out. Batch is multiple things in, multiple things out. Streaming, you get back a stream of things, which is important if you're streaming LLM calls. And stream, you only get the streaming bit of like the final response. Stream log actually streams every intermediate thing. So this is useful if you want to stream the intermediate results of a chain or the intermediate steps or something like that. And we can do these all, or we can expose all of these endpoints because of some stuff we've done under the hood in LangChain to make it easy to do this. And then because we know that these methods exist in the main LangChain class, we can expose them as endpoints. We've added like a playground page where you can easily interact with your chain. So super simple UI, it's not going to be the prettiest thing, but it will kind of like get the job done. Everything kind of like integrates with Langsmith, and we're working on adding more integrations here. It's built on top of battle-tested libraries. We've added a runnable, so we've added like a simple SDK basically for calling the API. And so this makes it easy to basically wrap it and then call it. You can also call it directly as a REST API. And then we've also added a bunch of templates. And so Eric will walk through some of that as well. Going through some or highlighting an example of what this actually looks like. And Eric will walk through this in more detail with the actual real example, but this is kind of like a toy example. So what you can do is you can basically import Fast API, so it's built on top of Fast API, and then you can import LangServe add routes. You initialize your app, and then you basically use add routes and pass in one of these runnable things. And so a runnable could just be a language model, or it could be a chain. And then you can specify the path as well. And so this allows you to add multiple in the same server. And that's it, really. There's a few more kind of like advanced options, but for the most part, this is pretty much it. You specify the runnable, which again is like a chain. You specify the path, and you use add routes, and you get everything mentioned above. So you'll get the docs at localhost or wherever you deploy it to on docs. You can have this runnable, which is basically an SDK, and then you can use this in just like you would a normal chain. So you can call invoke, you can call a invoke, you can string it together and create chains. You can use this as well in JavaScript. So we're thinking about and working on a JavaScript version of all of this. But in the meantime, if you deploy something in Python, you can easily call it from JavaScript. And we'll likely work on adding SDKs for other languages as well. And then this is what the playground looks like. And Eric will, I think, show a live example of this. But you'll notice that the playground has a few things. So first, it has some configuration options. So one thing that we've also done is make it possible to specify different configuration options. So like, what is the temperature of the LLM that you want to use? Which LLM do you want to use, OpenAI or Anthropic? What prompt do you want to use? What retriever do you want to use? And so if you specify those as configurations, you can then change them in the playground. And so this makes it easy to play around with things and test things out. That's the first bit. The second bit is this try it part where basically you have the inputs. So here there's only one input. So that's why only one input box shows up. But if there was multiple, then multiple things would show up. We've done a little bit of work as well to make things like chat history render nicely and files as well. So we actually have a few examples of file uploads. So you can easily, and so, I think we're not intending to build anything like Streamlit or anything like that, where you can dynamically create UIs and we'll always integrate super nicely with Streamlit and all of that. We do think there's 3 or 4 basic UIs that cover maybe like 80% of the use cases out there or more. And so we're going to build, support for those so that you just get it free out of the box. And then if you want to use it with a different UI, again, everything's exposed as APIs. So very possible to do so. The output shows the final output, but then also the intermediate steps. So you can see all the intermediate steps of the chain under the hood. And then sharing actually shares the configuration of this. So if you have changed like the prompt in LLM and you want to share this with a coworker so they could play around with it, you can get a nice URL for that configuration. Eric's going to cover how to install and use, and then the last thing I'll highlight is this deployment section, which is a little bit sparse. Right now we only have instructions for deploying for GCP. We'd love to get more instructions for deploying to other clouds and other services. So if that's something that people want to try out and provide feedback on and add instructions, we're incredibly open to contributions there. And then we're also working on a hosted version of our own, which has like a one-click deploy. And I'll add a link if you're interested in beta testing that. The advanced stuff, we talked a little bit about files. Custom inputs and output types, we try to automatically infer all the inputs and output types for chains, but sometimes we can't always do that. And so if you can't always do that, we've added like this with types thing. And so you'll notice that a lot of the chains in the templates that Eric will talk about have this with types. So you can always manually specify the typing if we're inferring it incorrectly. And then you can also do basically custom user types. And this is kind of how we do some of the file stuff as well. And it basically specifies how to decode things. And then playground widgets as well. And so this is how we do file widgets as well. So if you look at file widgets, this is the last thing, a bit more of an advanced use case, but you import this custom user type, you specify your input, and then you add this widget type thing that specifies it. Again, we're not intending for this to be kind of like a Streamlit cover. We're not gonna have hundreds of widgets. We're gonna have like one or two that we think are like pretty common for a lot of the LLM use cases. That's pretty much it as an overview of LangServe. Answering a few of the questions that I see in the chat before handing it off to Eric. How can we use LangServe with services like Azure App Services? I'm not entirely sure what Azure App Services are. I'm assuming it's a way to deploy things, and so we should add some instructions on how to deploy within that. Yeah, if people are interested in adding bindings for or SDKs for these things, I see a +1 for Golang. Yeah, we'd love to. Please reach out. I'll drop kind of like an email where people can reach out if they want to contribute that. At the end of the day, it should be pretty simple. This is a REST API. And so I think we just need, like all the remote runnable does is it exposes methods to call the invoke batch and streaming things and streaming logs. It might get a little bit complicated because some of the objects we pass are like LangChain objects. And so if there's not already LangChain schemas, then that starts to get a little bit gnarly. But at the very least, we can add kind of like simple SDKs for when the inputs and outputs are strings and things like that. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Eric, who will, I think, go talk about templates and also walk through an actual example or two instead of just showing documentation like I did.
Yeah, let's play a little bit. So I'm just going to share my screen and we'll talk a little bit about how you can get started with this pretty quickly. So yeah, as Harrison mentioned, LangServe is a great way of kind of hosting chains and kind of these LLM backends that you might be deploying. And we wanted to make it as easy as possible for you to kind of get started with that. And so that's kind of where templates come in, where we have, at the moment, there's, I think, 46 of them, different kind of starting points, depending on what kind of use case you want to work on. And we'll go through those a little bit. And so all of those actually just live in the Python LangChain GitHub repo under this templates folder. And you'll see that we have kind of a list of all of them just in the file system. So each template just occupies its own folder up there. And then we have a README kind of walking through how to get started. So we're just going to go through getting a new LangServe app started and installing kind of a RAG conversation chatbot into that and kind of modifying that to a kind of silly use case that we can use today. But it's supposed to mimic how you can do that as well. So everything is coordinated through a CLI that we've launched. And you can just install that here. And kind of with that, the only other thing that you'll want from this page is kind of figuring out which template you want to get started with. So for helping with that, we have this nice little index page at the bottom of this, which goes through a few different use cases that we can go through. So as mentioned, we're going to go through the retrieval augmented generation chatbot, which works with OpenAI and Pinecone, but there's lots of different templates in different kinds of categories that you can get started with. And the cool thing about LangServe and templates is that you can really go as deep as you want into the construction of them and modify anything you want. So with that, let's get started with the RAG chatbot. Each of the templates actually has instructions on spinning up that specific example. So in this case, I already set my API keys in my environment, and we can kind of just get started with installing the CLI. So kind of in my handy VS Code, the first thing we'll want to do is that just install command for the CLI. I already have it installed, but we'll pip install it anyways here. And that should work. And then right off the bat, we can just create a new app. So we'll do LangChain app new, my app, and then we can actually just define a package right away to install. As you'll notice in the README, there's actually ways of like adding packages to your app after the fact as well. So that'll just download the template into the template along with a LangServe instance into this my app folder. And so the LangServe instance is the LangServe app is in app. So we'll see that a server that looks roughly like what Harrison was showing off before exists in there, and then it'll download this RAG conversation package into packages. So we can install that as an editable dependency, just so our app can access that. And then it'll even generate us some add route code, which doesn't automatically insert into your file yet, but potentially coming soon. So all we're going to do is we're going to add this RAG conversation chain into our server. So we'll paste that in there. In a perfect world, I would reorder the imports and things like that to get rid of that error. But from here, we can really just run our app. So we'll just run LangChain serve, and this will start up a little web server, which has both the fast API docs already generated, as well as that playground that Harrison mentioned before. So let's actually try playing with that playground. This particular app is indexing this blog post about agents. It's, I don't know, one of Lance's favorites, so it's a common one in a lot of the examples. And we can just ask some questions about it. So we can ask something like, I don't know, what does COT stand for, or some other questions about this blog post, and it'll do semantic search and actually generate a response for us. And then, as Harrison mentioned, we can actually see all the intermediate steps that are running as well, in terms of like which sections of the document actually got passed in, and kind of what prompt it's using in order to generate or stream that response back to us. But where it gets really fun is we can actually play with this and edit it to our use case. So if we just go into this RAG conversation chain, this isn't installed as like a non-editable Python dependency. It's really meant to be edited to your use case. And there's a lot of runnable code in here, but we can just modify it to kind of suit what we want. And so, for example, here, the answer synthesis prompt is like asking us to answer a question based on the following context. Maybe we just want to say, like, respond as if you were a pirate, or have it respond in some other style. And so just by saving that, we can now ask our same question again, and we'll get back kind of a more pirate-themed chain of thought response. That's the playground. One other thing that comes with Fast API, this isn't something we added, but you can actually see all the API docs for your LangServe instance. So behind the scenes of the playground is actually calling stream log, because it's streaming back all of those intermediate steps as well. But you can, of course, use any of these from other languages, kind of SDKs, TBD. But yeah, it's just a nice little REST API that you can use. Anything I missed right off the bat, Harrison?
I think that's a pretty good overview.
Cool. Yeah, I'm going to go back to the chat and see if there's any... Oh, was I sharing my code properly? Hopefully. Or was it all web browser?
I think a lot of it was web browser.
Oh, awesome. Okay. Thanks, Bora. Just wanted to make sure I was showing off the terminal as well. But yeah, that's kind of how you get started with LangServe templates. Yeah, whatever's most useful. We can go through some other templates if people are interested. There's templates in there ranging, as you'll see from the list, there's actually a ton of retrieval augmented generation ones, just because that's a use case we keep seeing. There's some fun ones doing RAG on top of like graph databases like Neo4j. There's a really cool one using time series data from Timescale. But it's really cool that we have a bunch of partners who are kind of helping get people started with these kinds of advanced retrieval techniques, and you don't really have to write all that much code to start.
Yeah, and not just like advanced retrieval techniques, but there's one that does like extraction of like plate data for like biotech data, right? And so like that's something that would never go in LangChain because it's just like hyper specific. But now we can have like an end-to-end example or template, and it's easy to pull down, easy to modify, easy to see what's going on. And so one thing that I'm really excited about is basically like we want to add a lot more templates for a lot of these like use cases as well. And so if people have ideas, like one, actually, so one, we'll share a link to a GitHub project where we have a lot of, where we're starting to keep track of all these ideas for templates, and I encourage you to both add ideas there, but then also see if there are ideas there that you want to add and implement yourself. Yeah, and then the other thing that I think is there are a lot of cool templates there that do things that we hadn't had in LangChain before. So one of the and basically what we'll be doing over the next few days is highlighting those on Twitter. So like yesterday, you know, we have like a parent document retriever that uses like Neo4j, right? And that's something that just like wasn't in LangChain before, but now it's in a template. And I think when we announced it, we announced it big with all like 50 templates or however many. But there's a lot of really cool ones that deserve their own shine. And so we'll be giving a lot more attention to those over the next few weeks. I think we'll probably. Do you have anything else that you want to share, Eric? I see a request.
You can do like an extraction one if that's fun.
Yeah. If do you maybe want to get that queued up and I can answer some questions, and then we can hand it back to you for one more thing and then answer more questions after that?
Sounds like a plan.
Cool. All right. So let's go to some of the questions, and I'm looking at the questions in the QA box on the right. So please drop them there and upvote ones that you want to see answered. So I see a few, or I see two that are kind of like related to the UI parts. So one, which is, when could we expect to have out-of-the-box integrations for standard UIs like Streamlit, Vercel? And then the other one that I see that's similar is that front end editable? And if it was built in Streamlit, doesn't mean that I can change it, basically. And so, okay, so right now the current front end is not really editable. It's inferred. It's kind of like just intended to. It's out of the box for free. You get that. We're thinking about how to do editable front ends, and so yeah, I think our current. So again, like all of the front end is just backed by this like REST API, and so it can hook into any front end. And so one of the things that we're thinking about a little bit is having like, just like you have templates of the back end of the chains that you pull down and run. We're thinking of having templates of front end things that you pull into your application, and then you use those instead of the playground. If that's something that people are interested in working on, again, I'm gonna put I'm gonna put an email in the chat, which is probably like the best place to reach out if you have kind of specific questions, or you want to work. Like front end templates are a good reason to reach out because those don't exist yet, so there's not like a standard way to add them. And we obviously have some thoughts on how they should be added, but we haven't really. We're still figuring it out. So if that's something that's interesting to you to like jam on or add some, please reach out to the email I just put in the chat. Like would love to hear and work with folks on that. Yeah, so the front end's currently not configurable. We want to have a similar way of like pulling in, or we think that's interesting to explore. I'm not gonna. Yeah, there's obviously a lot to do and a lot to prioritize. The next question I see, pedantic in addition to just with types. So I think this is around how to type the chains correctly. So yeah, basically, yes, like the way that with types work is you pass it a pedantic model, and that base model kind of like exposes the types. So it's conjunction with both. It doesn't have to be a pedantic model actually, so you can pass it like a string. The issue with passing it a string is it doesn't give it a good name. So I think all the examples we have use pedantic and then pass pedantic models to with types. How can we deploy with LangServe to production? So we have one example in the LangServe GitHub, which I linked at the beginning of the chat, of using GCP to deploy. This is another area where if you want to work on templates for deploying to Azure, to AWS, it would be good to reach out, or yeah, I mean, we don't have a template to deploy to GCP. We just have instructions to deploy to GCP. So I think like adding instructions to deploy to AWS, to Azure, to whatever kind of like to Vercel, whatever is interesting. We'd love to have those, and would love contributions there. Do you have a example lined up, Eric, that we could switch back to?
Yeah, we can just do an OpenAI functions one.
Let's do that.
So back to screen sharing, and I'll hide the little extra thing this time. So yeah, for this one, we can go down to the extraction section and use an OpenAI functions one. And so all the READMEs look very similar, but they have different packages that they actually install. But in this case, we actually have an existing project, so we can run this LangChain app add instead of just creating a new one with the package. So if we go back to our app, so as we saw, we have like our RAG conversation one installed from before, and so we can just add extraction OpenAI functions. So this will download and install that new template, and so this one will be more of an extraction use case rather than RAG. So we'll actually provide context for it instead of asking a question. So here we can just add our second route. So now we're going to have two different sets of endpoints, and I can actually just show that off in the Fast API docs. So if I refresh this, we'll see now that we have all the invoke, batch, stream, and stream log calls for RAG conversation, which was the first example that we went over, or first template that we went over. And we also now have these extraction OpenAI functions ones, which just take in a single string instead of both like a chat history and a question. And so if we go to our playground, so this is going to be our RAG conversation playground, but we can go to extraction OpenAI functions, and we're adding a little index so it's easier to get to these links. So in this case, if we look at the README for extraction OpenAI functions, what this is going to do is it's going to extract the title and author of papers, which we'll look at in a sec, and we'll try and customize it to extract something else. But we can actually just use the same article over here, just because it also has papers and authors. So if we just paste in some section of this, we can see that it's able, not reminders, we can see that it's able to extract out those authors and papers that are kind of covered in this task decomposition section. And let's actually go into that template to see why it's doing just papers instead. So here we can see that we have just a prompt going into a model, which has kind of some OpenAI functions set on it. And then we'll talk a little bit about how we can design those ourselves. And then in the end, it's just going to output that papers key, which is just going to be a list of papers according to our kind of pedantic model here. And then we can see that it's extracting title and author because we defined those as the fields to extract. So let's say, I don't know, what's something we might want to extract from Harrison? Let's say we want to extract environment variables from our nice template readmes. So in that case, we can kind of switch out our template, our prompt, for something where you will get a README file about a project, about a developer project. Please extract the environment variables necessary to get started with it. So let's use that one instead of this. And then instead of extracting titles and authors, we'll just have kind of environment variable as a string. And then instead of calling that paper, let's call that environment variables. So with that, we should be able to, and then we probably want to return that instead of returning the papers. So this is a live demo, so hopefully this works. But we can go back to our playground, and then instead of pasting in this section of paper, we can just paste in our extraction OpenAI functions, one as our input, and run it.
And one thing that,
say it again.
One thing that we can add more templates for is basically like putting in a URL, right? So like the extraction, like copy pasting that Eric does, like you can put anything behind these functions. It doesn't have to like take in text. So it can take in a URL. It can then like load that URL past that to the chain downstream. So I think like or you can upload files like with the file widget. So I think for like a lot of the extraction use cases, we probably should add more examples of doing that, of like, you know, actually loading the document, because one of the nice things about LangChain is we have a bunch of document loaders as well. So we can take advantage of those.
Yeah, and right now a lot of those document loaders have to be used kind of on the user side. And so we have a few examples of using those from like Jupyter notebooks that are included with the templates. But yeah, long-term, the vision is to include those document loaders, not only with the templates or in notebooks with the templates, but as like kind of first-party citizens, such that you can upload a file and actually run like a PDF document loader on it, or that kind of thing. And before, you may have caught that I had a little bug that was causing me to still return paper information. It's because I was editing the wrong chain.py file because I've created too many of these templates in the last week. But yeah, as we can see now, we have our kind of input set here, and it's able to extract out an OpenAI API key is the only one. If we go back to our RAG one, which had a few more environment variables that were necessary, we can copy this whole thing and see if it's able to extract all 4 of those as well. Cool. Oh, and it's extracting some extras. It's actually telling us that in order to set up LangSmith, there's actually 3 extras that we can install from down here in our optional LangSmith configuration section. So that's nifty.
Awesome. So I think probably good to wrap up and answer some of the final questions that are in the chat. I see a few around memory and chat history memory, which is a very good question. Right now, yes, the LangServe servers are meant to be stateless. So I think so right now, the main way that we recommend people do chat history is handle it on the front end or handle it outside the API. We're looking into improving that experience so that people can take advantage of a lot of the external database integrations that we've added for chat history. And so that's one of the big things that we're pushing on, and we should have some updates there because we know that. So yeah, we're working on making kind of like the playground support chat natively. We're working on better documentation for how to manage chat in the front end. And then we're also working on supporting using the external databases in the backend. So pushing on a few different paths there. And I think this is also related. Is there a predefined way to restart LangServe chat history? Right now, nothing's stored there. We'll add more documentation and basically beef up that support over time. Could you outline the development roadmap for LangServe, particularly with its role in facilitating scalable and complex architecture designs? Additionally, will LangServe provide specialized endpoints for different components, agents, chains, etc.? Yeah, that's a good question. So I'll maybe answer the last one first. So will we provide specialized endpoints for different components? Right now, all components expose kind of like the same interface, even in LangChain. So they do. So if you think about retrievers, like they do have like a get. They have like a get relevant documents method, which is obviously different than like a chat model method. But they also expose the same interface in the sense that they all expose the dot invoke. They all expose dot batch. They all expose dot stream, things like that. And so what we're doing, and that's due to some changes that we made under the hood to have kind of like a common interface for everything. And so what that means is that we probably won't have specialized endpoints at the moment for different things because we'll handle them in like a generic way. But I do think there's a good chance that we start having like a collection of templates that are themselves retrievers or something like that. So I think like we have some advanced RAG methods in there that I think actually some of them probably are just like retrievers and they return documents. And so we'll start kind of like maybe having those be a more formalized thing. And then
and as a note on that, the whole of LangServe just hosts like a fast API instance. So it's really easy to just add more like app.routes in the same way that you would to any fast API. So if you have some custom use case that you don't want to call invoke, batch, or stream, you can easily add that as well.
And I think that point's also relevant for the next part, which is like facilitating scalable and complex architecture designs. Part of this absolutely is to like I think we've taken kind of like a pragmatic view in building. I think we've taken a pragmatic view in building LangChain and building agents and building complex things. Where I think like first we tried to think about LangChain as what do you need in order to build these things? You need language models, you need prompts, you need vector stores, you need tools, you need ways to connect them all. That's kind of like LangChain, the open source. Then we saw that the next blocker was debugging these things. So that's kind of like LangSmith, the platform for like debugging. Then it's time to deploy like kind of like a simple application. And so that's kind of like LangServe. The next thing is kind of like a way to orchestrate many simple things together in like one larger thing. And so, yeah, we're working on some things there. We think LangServe is a great way to deploy like these individual components. And then a lot of it will kind of like come down to creating an application that calls these individual components in multiple ways. And so I think like one of the things that I want to actually add over the weekend maybe is GPT Researcher. I don't know if people have played around with it, but it's a great open source project and it has a few different, I wouldn't necessarily say it's like a multi-agent architecture because agent's an overloaded word, but it has like a few different roles where there's something that does research, there's something that writes summaries, and then there's something that combines everything into one document. And I think so those could all be their own individual endpoints, and then they're kind of like orchestrated together outside. And so I think, yeah, as we add more, definitely expect to see more in this vein. I see one question asking about kind of like an architectural decision for a use case. Probably going to skip that just to focus on LangServe and keep it kind of like narrowly focused on that. I see a question about passing. Is it possible to pass envars as .env? You can use a .env file and just load it. I think that should work equally well. When you deploy to GCP, are the endpoints public, or are they somehow protected so that only your clients can talk to the server? I imagine that's probably how you define I imagine that's probably up to you when you define the command that deploys it onto GCP. Yeah.
Eric, you can also use any of the fast API security extensions if you want to add some sort of like user authentication or just like basic username password. you can just add those in.
And then I see a comment called LangServe. Yeah, part of the fun is that we get to come up with different names with different emojis. So, cool. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all I had. Anything that you want to add, Eric?
No, thanks all for coming in.
All right. Yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. Definitely check it out. Let us know any feedback, and then shoot us some emails at that email if you're interested in any of the more extended opportunities.
And if
All
you have
right.
any templates requests, there's also a forum in Discord that you can request specific ones.
All right. Bye-bye.